Hi, I am back. It's been 24, well, how about, no, almost 24 hours since I abruptly didn't finish the book. So hopefully, fingers crossed, everything will um, stay on track, that we can finish this read. I think I left off on page 363, which was the middle of chapter 60. Um, so let's read. Let's get this done. So we left off that letters were being written about, it's funny, you made it, great. We left off in the middle of like these letters of communication that saying Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth are going to marry, and that's where we're going to pick up. The joy which Miss Darcy expressed on receiving similar information was as sincere as her brother's in sending it. 4 sides of paper were insufficient to contain all her delights, as she wrote on the front and the back of each page, like stationery. And they're saying even front and back of writing, she couldn't say all that she wanted to say. And it means she had a lot to think about. Nobody writes. Do any of you write letters anymore? I have an aunt who is 92, I think now, and so sweet. And she has Facebook, but she likes to communicate in paper. So I get snail mail from her, and then I write back in snail mail. So that's fun. That's nice to have that. But this was their only way of communicating. No Snapchat, no Messenger, no WhatsApp. They wrote their long letters out to each other. And all her earnest desire of being loved by her sister. Before any answer could arrive from Mr. Collins or any congratulations to Elizabeth from his wife, the Longbourn family heard that the Collinses were coming themselves to Lucas Lodge. The reason of this sudden removal was soon evident. Lady Catherine had been rendered so exceedingly angry by the contents of her nephew's letter that Charlotte, really rejoicing in the match, was anxious to get away till the storm was blown over. Remember, Charlotte is Elizabeth's friend. She's the one who married Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins is under the patronage of Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who is the aunt of Mr. Darcy, who's furious at the engagement. And being loyal to her friend, Charlotte didn't want to be there to hear all the unkind things. At such a moment, the arrival of her friend was a sincere pleasure to Elizabeth, though in the course of their meeting she must sometimes think the pleasure dearly bought. When she saw Mr. Darcy exposed to all the parading and I cannot say this word. I've never been able to say this word. Obsequious civility of her husband, he bore it, however, with admirable calmness. He could have even listened to Sir William Lucas when he complimented him on carrying away the brightest jewel of the country, and expressed his hopes of their all meeting frequently at St. James, with very decent composure. If he did shrug his shoulders, it was not till Sir William was out of sight. Mrs. Phillip's vulgarity was another, and perhaps a greater tax on his forbearance. And though Mrs. Phillips, as well as her sister, stood in too much awe of him to speak with the familiarity which Bingley's good humor encouraged, yet, whenever she did speak, she must be vulgar. Nor was her I think vulgar is more like rude at the time, because now vulgar means like sexually inappropriate. And I don't think that's what they mean. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Timpani is what I was thinking. My handwriting's not great either. And I think for the most part, this generation just doesn't handwrite. Even in school, most of you are on computers now. It is nice weather. And that's why I thought the sun might change my mood and help me feel better. I'm so irritated with this chest. I fear that it's become bronchitis again. So I just can't seem to get better. Mrs. Phillips, Mrs. Phillips, as well as her sister, stood in too much awe of him to speak with the familiarity which Bingley's good humor encouraged. Yet whenever she did speak, she must be vulgar. nor was her respect for him, though it made her more quiet, at all likely to make her more elegant. Elizabeth did all she could to shield him from the frequent notice of either, and was ever anxious to keep him to herself and to those of her family with whom he might converse without mortification, like embarrassment. And though the uncomfortable feelings arising from all this took the season of courtship much of its pleasure, it added to the hope of the future, and she looked forward with delight to the time when they should be removed from society so little pleasing to either, to all the comfort and elegance of their little party at Pemberley. I know, it's just the oxygen. I just can't get a good deep breath, and I've got that hacky cough and the wheeze, Thank you for, yes, Fanny, thank you for your consideration. It's a hard time. The funeral will be Wednesday, but we're about to start on 61, and my goal was to get it finished. And I know in particular you, yes, Fanny, aren't you waiting for Animal Farm? But probably I'm not going to have time to get to it until the weekend because I'll have a lot of, I have to work tomorrow, and then we'll have the funeral Wednesday. And just taking care of family things, So it'll probably be later in the week before I can get to Animal Farm. The water really makes a difference. And the sun. When you guys are depressed or going through a hard time, I just think nature and sunshine and birds chirping make all the difference, right? Hi, Elizabeth. Okay, so we are officially, drum roll, on the last chapter of Pride and Prejudice, which, by the way, I binge watched. Hulu has the 1995 series. That's what I got really hooked on back in the day with Colin Firth and some British actors and actresses that have gone on, you might recognize in other things. And it's a really close to the book. The end, I'm curious I just saw the end of it. I'm curious because I didn't remember the book ending the way this series did. And I'm curious, I'm peeking at the very last words of the book. So let's see what happens in this final chapter. Absolutely. What are we absolutely saying? Sydney White, I love your accent. Do I have an accent? As my Southern comes out. Sydney, what type of English do you speak that my English has an accent to it? Because obviously I have if you know many people from Louisiana, I have a really clean accent compared to most of my colleagues. So I'm really curious to hear what part of the world you're from. Or, oh, the sunshine. Yes, you agree. I don't remember what I say, Priyanka. So I just ramble sometimes. And I'm really, Sydney, I'm embarrassed because, I'm slaughtering Austin then. I wonder if she ever expected some Southern American woman to be reading her book. I was thinking today after watching the Hulu episodes, I'd really like to know what happened to Lydia and Wickham, what happened to, Elizabeth and Darcy are two very strong characters. Did they have a happy marriage? Did they fight? So forth. Chicago. My brother's up there, and they all talk like this. Hey, I'm going to the mall. You want to go with? It's kind of an exaggeration, Tim Panini, but that's what they sound like to me. And when I'm really tired, like I am now, my Southern, and I grew up in Michigan. I didn't always have this accent, but I've lived here most of my life. I do still say pen instead of pen. Give me an ink pen. That's how we say it down here. And I am an ESL, English Second Language teacher, so I try to speak clean vowels, but, when I'm tired, the Southern, it's just so lazy. It just slides right out of you. It'll put you to sleep. So I'm really curious. I would love somebody that's a brilliant Austin student that really knows her work and her style, to come give us an update on what happened to Jane and Bingley, what happened to, like, did, oh, what's the character's name? The daughter of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Did she finally get married? Did Miss Bingley, um, Mr. Bingley's sister, did she find her rich husband? It'd be really cute to see. And I know there's what do they call fan literature or something? I think that would be an interesting, like, what do you think happened to all these characters? Grocery. I I say grocery. I mean, we say grocery down here. Do some people say grocery? I would not say that. I'd say grocery. The grocery store. We don't even say store. I mean, we don't even say grocery store. I'm going to the store. Now down here, they say I'm going to make groceries. I don't say that. I say I'm going to go to the store, meaning I'm going to get, like, or Walmart, which is I'm going to Walmart pickup, which means I'm getting groceries. Um, the greengrocer, I don't think it was grocer. I don't know. I mean, I know people say it, but I don't know where they say grocer. I could talk about difference in how people pronounce things all day. So, Sydney, thanks for bringing that point up. All right, chapter LXI 61. And it's only a few pages, so we should be done in time. Happy for all her maternal feelings was the day on which Mrs. Bennet got rid of her two most deserving daughters. With what delighted pride she afterwards visited, so the wedding day, she delighted pride she afterwards visited Mrs. Bingley and talked of Mrs. Darcy may be guessed. I wish I could say, for the sake of her family, that the accomplishment of her earnest desire in the establishment of so many of her children produced so happy an effect as to make her a sensible, amiable, well-informed woman for the rest of her life, though perhaps it was lucky for her husband, who might not have relished domestic felicity in so unusual a form, that she still was occasionally nervous and invariably silly. So Austen's saying, well, I'd like to be able to tell you that with the marriage of three of her five daughters, Miss Bennet settled down and got to be a better person. But she said, that might have been too unsettling for Mr. Bennet. She's being ironic here. She still had her nervous bouts every now and then. Guys, the sun is streaming on the screen, so it's hard for me to see what y'all write. Oh, it's the same. You didn't add anything. Mr. Bennet missed his second daughter exceedingly. His affection for her drew him oftener from home than anything else could do. He delighted in going to Pemberley, especially when he was least expected. Mr. Bingley and Jane remained at Netherfield only a 12-month. So near a vicinity to her mother and Meryton relations was not desirable even to his easy temper or her affectionate heart, so they couldn't stay so nearby the mom. The darling wish of his sisters was then gratified. He bought an estate in a neighboring county to Derbyshire, and Jane and Elizabeth, in addition to every other source of happiness, were within 30 miles of each other. Oh, that's good, because they're the best friend sisters. Kitty, to her very material advantage, spent the chief of her time with her two elder sisters, in society so superior to what she had generally known. Her improvement was great, because she was really, remember, there are only 15 or 16, Kitty and Lydia. And so with the taking her away from the influence of her mother and the country, bringing her into court or around a more sophisticated group of people, Jane and Elizabeth had a real positive influence on Kitty. So we're really getting a wrap up here. And removed from the the influence of Lydia's example, she became, by proper attention and management, less irritable, less ignorant, and less insipid. From the further disadvantage of Lydia's society, as she was of course carefully kept, and though Mrs. Wickham frequently invited her to come and stay with her with the promise of balls and young men, her father would never consent to her going. Mary was the only daughter who remained at home, and she was necessarily drawn from the pursuit of accomplishments by Mrs. Bennet's being quite unable to sit alone. Mary was obliged to mix more with the world, but she could still moralize over every morning visit, and as she was no longer mortified by comparisons between her sister's beauty and her own, it was suspected by her father that she submitted to the change without much reluctance. So Mary kind of grows into her own puppy feet. As for Wickham and Lydia, their characters suffered no revolution from the marriage of her sisters. He bore with philosophy the conviction that Elizabeth must now become acquainted with whatever his ingratitude and falsehood had before been unknown to her, and in spite of everything was not wholly without hope that Darcy might yet be prevailed on to make his fortune. Ever the scammer, he's like, okay, they know the truth about me. That's okay. Maybe it'll work out for my best. The congratulatory letter which Elizabeth received from Lydia on her marriage explained to her that, by his wife at least, if not by himself, such a hope was cherished. The letter was to this effect: My dear Lizzie, I wish you joy. If you love Mr. Darcy half so well as I do my dear Wickham, you must be very happy. It is a great comfort to have you so rich, and when you have nothing else to do, I hope you will think of us. I am sure Wickham would like a place at court very much, and I do not think we shall have quite money enough to live upon without some help. Any place would do, of about 300 or 400 a year. But however, do not speak to Mr. Darcy about it if you'd rather not. Yours, etc. They don't change, do they? All the other ones kind of matured and grew up, but Lydia and Wickham, no. As it happened that Elizabeth had much rather not, she endeavored in her answer to put an end to every entreaty and expectation of the kind. Such relief, however, as it was in her power to afford by the practice of what might be called economy in her own private expenses, she frequently sent them. It had always been evident to her that such an income as theirs, under the direction of two persons so extravagant in their wants and heedless of the future, must be very insufficient to their support. And whenever they changed their quarters, either Jane or herself were sure of being applied to for some little assistance towards discharging their bills, their manner of living, even when the restoration of peace dismissed them to a home, was unsettled in the extreme. They were always moving from place to place in quest of a cheap situation, and always spending more than they ought. His affection for her soon sunk into indifference. Hers lasted a little longer, and in spite of her youth and her manner, she remained all the claims to reputation which her marriage had given her. Though Darcy could never receive him at Pemberley, yet for Elizabeth's sake, he assisted him further in his profession. Lydia was occasionally a visitor there, when her husband was gone to enjoy himself in London or Bath. I've actually been to Bath. I've been to London too, but I mean, you would expect. It was beautiful. I loved it. I was young. I need to go back now that I'm old and take the baths. I don't know if you still can do the spa there. And with the Bingleys, they both of them frequently stayed so long that even Bingley's good humor was overcome, and he proceeded so far as to talk of giving them a hint to be gone. Miss Bingley was very deeply mortified by Darcy's marriage. This kind of answers what I was talking about before. But as she thought it advisable to retain the right of visiting at Pemberley, she dropped all her resentment, was fonder than ever of Georgiana, almost as attentive to Darcy as heretofore, and paid off every arrear of civility to Elizabeth. Pemberley was now Georgiana's home, and the attachment of the sisters was exactly what Darcy hoped to see. They were, meaning Georgiana and Elizabeth. Georgiana had the highest opinion in the world of Elizabeth, though at first she often listened with an astonishment bordering on alarm at her lively, sportive manner of talking to her brother. He, who had always inspired in herself a respect which almost overcame her affection, she now saw the object of open pleasantry. So his marriage to Elizabeth made the relationship between Georgiana and Darcy better. Her mind received knowledge which had never before fallen in her way. By Elizabeth's instruction, she began to comprehend that a woman may take liberties with her husband, which a brother will not always allow in a sister more than 10 years younger than himself. Sorry, I should have turned my sound off. Lady Catherine was extremely indignant on the marriage of her nephew, and as she gave way to all the genuine frankness of her character, in her reply to the letter which announced its arrangement, she sent him language so very abusive, especially of Elizabeth, and this is what she threatened to do, that for some time all intercourse was at an end. But at length, by Elizabeth's persuasion, he was prevailed on to overlook the offense and seek a reconciliation, and after a little further resistance on the part of his aunt, her resentment gave way, either to her affection for him or her curiosity to see how his wife conducted herself, and she condescended to wait on them at Pemberley, in spite of that pollution with its woods had received, not merely from the presence of such a mistress, but with the visits of her uncle and aunt from the city. With the Gardiners, they were always on the most intimate terms. Darcy, as well as Elizabeth, really loved them, and they were both ever sensible of the warmest gratitude towards the persons who, by bringing her into Derbyshire, had been the means of uniting them. Fini in French, the end. We did it. So they wrap up all the details, which I think is interesting. A couple things that I think are interesting. I wonder if you do, as they're telling how everybody worked out their relationships and matured. We see Austen's portrayal of what she thinks a perfect society is. We've got mutual respect, where those that didn't deserve a happy ending, they didn't get punished. Like, she didn't have Wickham and Lydia miserable, but you could see that they didn't have the complete happiness. But it was interesting, she didn't have them all with babies, because that culture and that society was all about procreation. So clearly an interesting book of its time, and I think still relevant to today and our expectation of marriage and relationships and family structure, class. It's an interesting examination of it. Where are we going to meet up? That's right. I forget that's where you are. I know I am actively planning to be in Germany in July or August. I'm actively, but I don't have the dates yet. I have to kind of look at my work schedule. But I'm just planning on Germany at this point. I don't think I'll make it into England. And I'm hoping to go with one of my daughters. I just don't know who all's going to go. I've got friends in Germany that have invited me. And I love to travel. When I taught, I spent most summers teaching and traveling so that it paid for my travel. My son lived in London. He's in Brazil now. So he would probably want to go to England with me if I ever went back. And I would love to do that now. It's just while we wait to see, between Brexit and between politics and between COVID, travel, I think, has changed so much. And now that I work, an office job, it's harder to take off the time, because when I do a trip like that, I like to have a month. For Reed, I finished the movie, but I should have done a teleparty for that, but I don't think you can teleparty with Hulu, but we could probably do it on one of my apps, my Whereby app or something like that. All right, guys, thank you so much for reading along. If you want to discuss Pride and Prejudice with us, make sure you come over to Discord and join us. I'll make sure I post that in the comments below, as everyone says, and stay tuned to Animal Farm is coming next. And in the middle of all this funeral and loss of a loved one, you sit with family and you talk. And one of my pseudo son-in-laws is really good at all of this. He's already developing some merch for us. I think we're getting the icon and the logo going, and I'm excited about the merch. I think it'll be really useful. I mean, it might be jackets and t-shirts like everybody, but I have some ideas of like school planners and stickers to mark your bookmarks, and stickers to mark what page you're on in your book or when the assignment's due, that sort of thing. So I'm pretty excited about that. It's, we always say, keep reading. I'll read to you next time. Let's read. BTF. So some ideas like that. So we're working on that, and who knows, I probably will never get it done. So if my kids don't help me with it, it will never happen. But if they do, then we'll have some fun merch to share. You guys have a great day. Fareed, I'll chat with you on Discord. I'm probably going to get a nap in because, that winded me. I appreciate y'all so much. It helps to have this to come to. So probably time to go. I'm going to start a coughing fit. If you haven't subscribed, do it. If you haven't rung the bell, do it so you know when I'm coming on. If you haven't come to Discord and you want to chat about books, come on over and I will read to you next time. See ya.